And I was on a plane to Stockholm, if that's not atrocious name dropping, to see a friend of yours. And I was reading an article by a journalist called Jeff Cooper from the FT, and he was talking about the fall of the Berlin Wall. He was talking about his generation, which is my generation, and the impact that this had on him and his friends. And it was something incredible, something magical. One of the really big intractable issues facing the world, the Cold War, for many, many decades, had been solved by politicians coming together, working together hand in hand and resolving these really, really big issues. And what he was doing was that he was taking that and contrasting that with politics today, where there is unbelievable apathy amongst the electorates. General election in a couple of weeks over here, voter turnout will probably be very low, probably be a hung parliament. There's not a lot of, lot of negativity, not a huge amount of positivity about messages. And that's kind of replicated in lots of other cities around the world, and even in America, where Obama's not been able to really deliver all the promise that perhaps we had for him not that many years ago. And he was talking about this void opening up in this space, and into this space had jumped technologists. So he was talking about how, for example, it's Eric Schmidt from Google who's going to North Korea and trying to get communications with that state going. He was talking about how Mark Zuckerberg is trying to use the internet and get the poor online and try to eradicate poverty. He was talking about how Bill Gates is reinvesting the money he's made from technology to cure disease and famine, and how social media technology is empowering freedom movements like the Green Movement in Iran and IS, which is entirely based on social media for its communications, and how things like mobile phone technology will also be trying to sort issues around education in Africa, and some of the really, really big issues facing us as a planet are far more likely to be solved in Silicon Valley or maybe in Shoreditch Roundabout than would be in the House of the Parliament or in the Senate or in any other sort of political area. So things like climate change, things like cures for cancer, Elon Musk's investing into space rocketry and looking at going forward into new worlds. These are all domains that previously would have been held by governments and are now held by technologists. And he was really finishing up by saying what an incredible power technology has to disrupt old existing orders. And in some ways it's this famous Facebook map, the ability of technology to break through really, really entrenched barriers of geography, of religion, race, age, gender, and bring the world together in a way that had never really been seen or believed to be possible. And in some ways, and it is quite a big leap to go from the big weighty issues around climate change and curing cancer and then into retail. But in some ways, I think it could be argued that there has been a very, very similar step change over the last decade. And it's so easy to forget how quickly all of this has happened. It's so easy to forget how quick digital has emerged and how important it is for us now. But I was an old school luxury marketing director, and when I think about the brands that I was working with, and let's take a brand like Gucci, for example. I'm not picking on Gucci because they're all basically behaving in a very similar way, but Gucci 10 years ago told you what to wear, how to wear it, when to wear it. They created a brand world and they offered an opportunity for you to get involved, not too close, because the brand is the brand. And it was all absolutely one-way communication, very, very linear. And what digital has done is turn a one-way communication into a two-way conversation. As Ibrahim was saying, a dialogue into a conversation. So Louis Vuitton may well be saying that their bag is the most important product for this season, but if the background noise of chatter of your networks and your networks and social media and the bloggers, all these really, really powerful entities believe that actually it's not, Louis Vuitton will struggle to really get that bag through to their customer base. One person that could have talked a lot better than myself about this was Steve Jobs, and he had this notion of the infinite loop, a really, really powerful consumer brand relationship. And the way that he initially used it was the notion of a brand that has such a strong connection to a consumer that that consumer will automatically purchase the next product. They won't go online, they won't look for competition, they won't evaluate several different competing products. They will automatically buy the iPhone 6 because I had the iPhone 5. I will definitely get the new iPad. Maybe I'll get the new watch, and I'm not going to look at any other offer because I'm an Apple convert. And clearly Apple had that very, very strong link, and it was such an important part of his philosophy, his methodology, that he named the address after it. But in later years, he was reusing this notion of the infinite loop in a slightly different way. He was talking about how brands can throw out communication to consumers, but then how consumers pick that conversation up, sort of blend it using different ideas and push it back to the brand, that brand then taking that and pushing it back to the consumers. And he almost had this idea of a feedback loop going back and forth and back and forth, and that's how he saw the future of retail. And I think, there are some of our brands, this is a Burberry fashion show, I think this image really expresses that for me very, very well, which is a fashion show from Burberry held in the Serpentine about 2 years ago now. And what you'll see here was just before the launch of the iPhone 5. And what Burberry did was take the iPhone 5 and film the entire fashion show using iPhone 5. Now, what's great about that is if you look in the audience, you'll see that everybody's got their mobile phones out. And what Burberry are saying here is that we don't have control of this anymore. We all have control of it, and Burberry have got its networks, and I'll push that content out to the Burberry networks. These people have got their networks, and collaboratively we will all tweet, post about this fashion show, but it's not just Burberry anymore. It now belongs to the world. And this image here of a camera dolly, we did a lot of work on this show, and in the old days 4 or 5 of us would have to lift this 100-pound camera and put it up onto this dolly, and here there are 3 gold iPhone 5s held on with sticky tape and blue tack, and that's the future of the fashion show as Burberry saw it then. And just to talk a little bit more about Burberry, because I must admit I'm very, very rude about a lot of the technology that they do, but some of the things I think they do very well, and this is a really important point for me, is they may or may not be innovative using technology, but they are very innovative in using ideas. So Chris Bailey was talking a little bit about this a year ago, and he saw this store, which is the store in Regent Street, as a content library. He saw it almost like the BBC worldwide, where fashion shows and pop concerts and other content can be filmed and then pushed out to their networks. And what he was saying is that Burberry is now only an online shop. It's an online brand, and the physical stores are simply there to support the online. Now, nothing's actually changed. They have physical stores, they have online. In reality, nothing's changed. But he's just positioned Burberry away from all of his competition, who are all about the flagship store, by saying flagship stores are important, but it supports the online. And I guess, that's really what we at Holition are all about. We shouldn't get hung up on technology. I find technology so desperately dull. It's a world of screens, it's a world of wires, it's a world of microprocessors. I don't need to know how my iPhone works. I just need my emails, I need to look at my diary, I want to surf the web, my daughter wants to play Angry Birds. It's about user experience, and it's not about the technology. And actually, we're talking about the future of retail. There is an argument to be made that says that the future of retail is not a dramatic technological shift, it's a dramatic ideas shift, and then it's about trying to find the right technology to enable you to deliver those ideas. So an example is this. There have been about 2 or 3 retail moments where I've sat up and I've gone, holy cow, that's amazing. One was when I realized that Apple were becoming a media company and not just a laptop and desktop company. But one of them was this. This was, I was listening at a conference in Paris about 20 years ago now. And Pierre-Alexis Dumas, who's the creative director for Hermès, stood up and he said this extraordinary thing to us, luxury believing that we controlled all of that communication. He said that when he goes into an Hermès shop and he sees Hermès product, he does not think that that product really sums up that brand. And if, thinking back 10 years ago, if your product in your if your product in your shop does not sum up your brand, then what on earth does? And what he was saying is, when I see a row of ties in an Hermès shop, I don't think they've got any personality at all. He said they look like a row of faceless soldiers. And what he was interested in is what happens when those products go out of the shop and then are used in people's lives. The tie could be a chief executive's tie or a footballer's tie with a big knot, could be used as a belt, could be used in hundreds of different ways. And how he saw Hermes was as an initiator of other people's lives. And of course, he then pushed out this site, which is Je m'en carré, I love my scarf. The idea was that people would start tweeting back. This was copied by Burberry's in the Art of the Trench, and now most brands have got some facility where you can take photographs of you wearing their product and post it back. But these guys were the first. And of course now, with technology, that idea is being replicated again and again and again. But it's the idea that matters, the idea of sharing, the idea of being interested in somebody else's stories and not just my own story, less about ego and more about the collective. So Holition, there were 4 of us at the beginning. In the beginning, there were 4 of us. We all came from luxury. We were all very, very interested in the role of technology between luxury and between this new emerging consumer that everybody took for granted except luxury. No one is going to buy a Cartier watch online. One of the very, very first meetings we ever had was with Bernard Fornard, who's now in charge of Richemont Group and then was managing director of Cartier. And he said, "Jonathan, I love what you guys are trying to do, but until somebody can prove to me that the internet will still be here in 3 years' time, Cartier are not going to go off and do anything mad and crazy and digital." And hey, Bernard, look what's happened subsequently. So that's the kind of space that we were in. We're very, very fortunate that the bar was set very low, so it was relatively easy to step over it. And we started out doing a whole load of projects that I feel really horribly embarrassed to even look at it, because that's where the technology and the user experience was 7 years ago, where you put your hand up, you can try on a virtual watch, and we did these for Tissot, and we did these for Tag Heuer. But I think the interesting thing is that we started right at the moment when luxury was starting to think about digital. So in some ways our journey has replicated the brand's journey as they've got more interested in these tools and they've started to use them in more sophisticated ways. So initially everything was about the shop. It's a stitch of the Birkin bag, it's the weight of the Rolex watch, it's a service that you get in my store. I don't really believe in online, so we'll have a geek area on the website where the geeks can play and we'll put your technology in it. So it was only online, don't go anywhere near my store. And then, oh, that's fun. Technology, eh? Anyone got any naughty jokes or dirty limericks? I'm not really into dance myself. Anyone that's seen me at a school disco will know.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you think about brands like Prada who don't really engage with digital?
I think they've got to struggle. I think they're going to struggle. I really think they're going to struggle. But I think it's... okay, so brands like Prada, most luxury, operate in a very, very similar way to Prada. Some around the outside don't, but there's almost like a safety in numbers. So this project we were doing with Louis Vuitton, I think I was saying to you, Bill, it was actually a very, very sort of basic technology project, but it was the first time that they'd ever taken digital and put it into a physical store. They've never done it before, ever. They've always kept those two separate. And now, after 10 years of digital, they've decided that they might just want to put it in something into a store. They thought it was unbelievably innovative to a strategic level that the CEO of Louis Vuitton had to come to our studio and systematically sign every page off. And there were about 438 chiefs and one of my guys who was the Indian building this thing. And it was just quite extraordinary. So, and they don't do e-commerce, and they're talking constantly about when we're going to do e-commerce, and they're not doing it. I think the reason why they're not doing it is that they are terrified of the fulfillment bit. They don't want your Louis Vuitton handbag turning up with your gas bill and your Amazon delivery. So they're trying to work that bit out. And the bit that I find so interesting about that is that they are so keen on the fulfillment being as on brand as the experience in a store, that they're prepared to take a higher cost for delivery than would be in the store. So in a world where everything is about efficiency and cost savings, and going online is an efficient way to operate, Louis Vuitton are prepared to accept that it'll be more expensive to deliver a satisfactory brand experience online than it will be in a physical store.
There's a technical glitch. Jonathan's presentation was so overawed.
I blowed the computer.
It has crashed it. So they're frantically in the back room rebooting.
I'm more than happy to just chat if you want.
If you can carry on ad-libbing, that would
Yeah, I'm very happy to chat.
They've just got to get the system.
Okay, well, why don't we just do this? So what I was then going to go and say is I was actually going to talk about 3 areas of technology that I think really need to be looked at. The 3 kind of core barriers in store. This would have taken us nearer and nearer and nearer to the retail store through projects for Boucheron, projects for Triumph Lingerie in Selfridges and Helena Christensen, and finally, nowadays, we're being asked more and more and more to put technology into a store. But there are 3 kind of key areas that I think all of us need to think very, very carefully about. Area 1, if I remember, Ibrahim, you put a picture of Bodymetrics up, which is this scanning booth in Selfridges, which gives you an amazing quality of fit. Selfridges love it because it's tech and it's quite interesting. Okay, so that's Burberry. Let's ignore that. Let's ignore that. That's Helena Christensen. God bless her. Bodymetrics. So, so the first kind of key point here is personally, again, very personal view, but I see a lot of technology in a retail space, and it's all been developed to enable a really interesting conversation between the brand and the consumer. But in about 80% of the examples that I see, and I see a lot, I think it puts a barrier between people and consumers. I think it does exactly the opposite of what it's intended to do. And I'll give you an example, and I hope there's no one from Marks & Spencer's in this room at the moment, but Marks & Spencer's invested a huge amount of money in rolling out big iPad-type screens which have the website on, so that if the item's not in the store, you'll very happily purchase it online, have it delivered, and all of that kind of thing. And nobody uses it. It's never, ever used. And why is that the case? I mean, I think there are lots of different views. My own personal view, and going back to Steve Jobs, is that one of the other things I think he did really well is that he reduced the distance between people and technology. So with your iPhone, you're very happy sort of playing around with your apps, but none of your apps come with an instruction manual of how to use it. You find out yourself, usually by making mistakes, and then you learn how to use it. I think asking people to do exactly the same process in store is a very, very big ask. I do not think that people will approach technology in a store unless, 1, they absolutely understand what the benefit of using that technology is. What will I get out of it? Why should I use it? And 2, they have to know intuitively how to work their way through that technology to get that benefit. And I think most of the case that does not happen. So Bodymetrics, you stand in this booth, you get laser beams fired at you. You have to be naked except for a pair of underwear, and if they're not white, Bodymetrics will give you a pair to put on. And then when you walk out, there's your body in full view of all of Selfridges as a 3D render, I should hasten to add. And it tells you exactly what shape you are, and therefore which of the jeans that are a metre away you should be using. And I would argue that the old-fashioned way of taking 2 or 3 pairs into a fitting room is probably better. So I think technology in store, it's absolutely got to be usable. Secondly, it's got to be good. I mean, there are so many of these kind of things out there. You know, I mean, she's obviously very well endowed, and that's about the only thing that I would possibly say about what the technology has done to this poor girl. But if you walk into a real store and you pick up a real item of clothing and you walk into a real fitting room and you try it on really, you're going to want to look cool, good looking, you know, funky, whatever the kind of attributes are. Because if you don't, you will take it out of that fitting room, you'll leave it in the shop, and you will not buy. So the starting point, where the bar is for all of this type of technology, it's got to at least deliver that. If it doesn't deliver that, you're not going to buy. So why, oh why, do so many brands push this kind of crap out, which I believe is damaging brands? So technology has got to at least deliver as good an experience in store as online. And if it doesn't, then it's not good enough, more work to be done. The reason why this happens is that all of this is being driven by technologists, not by retail or consumer experiences. So the idea, you know, from the technology point of view, this works brilliantly. A girl stands there, we track her body, we can put clothing on her, it kind of works, job done. No, job is not done, job has not even started. The third area is this one, and this is, I'm afraid, a bugbear of mine. I hate screens of all shapes and sizes in a retail store. I cannot understand this notion of, sorry, that's not true, I can understand it, but we're on a mission to kind of get rid of these screens. I can't stand walking into Burberry's, I'm having another go at them, and the first thing that happens is that somebody shows me an iPad. We're in the middle of the store. You should be looking up at the product. There should be technology there that takes you away from the iPad and looks at the bags and looks at the shoes and gets you working with the real product. iPads, fine for mobile. Laptops, fine for online, but the in-store experience is different, and just replicating identical experiences across all of those channels to me does not sound like omni-channel. It sounds like one channel, but in 3 different places. So we're on a mission to kind of try and get rid of those. And I'm of an age where I quite like Kate Bush, and I went along to Hammersmith last year and saw her play. And she said, look, please, please, please do not bring your mobile phones, do not bring your cameras, do not bring your iPads. I want to have a relationship with you. I want to look you guys in the eye, and I want to enjoy this special moment that we're having together. If you want to, I don't want to see a sea of iPads. And if you want to look at me on a tiny little screen, if that's preferable to looking at me in real life, go and get the DVD. But otherwise, come here and enjoy the experience. And why would that be different in retail? Why would that be different in retail? There's a great artist just around the corner called Dominic Wilcox, and he plays around with this importance of data, importance of the physical space, how they blur that line. This is his doorbell. It's literally just around the corner. Yeah, and that changes. So it's 2009 when I took that, but it changes every month. And he's really interested in this play because I say I hate mobile phones, but people are using them because, and I use them, by the way, because they're valuable. There is data there that is needed. The challenge is to get that data to you in a more interesting way. There's another great project. He didn't quite get permission to do it, but outside his door, outside that door, there's a crossing, Pelican Crossing. And what he wanted to do was replace the button with the touch button on an iPhone, so that you're standing there and there's red lights and you can choose to wait, but if you want the convenience of digital, it can recognise your thumbprint, charge you 10p, and the lights will change. So he just plays around with these areas, and what he's trying to do is show that there is a real need for data, but how do we show that in a physical space? So this is how we showed it in a physical space recently. You may or may not know the brand List. They're the fashion tech golden crew at the moment, constant coverage. They do a bit of predictive intelligence. We'll talk about that in a minute. And they're apparently selling $20 to $30 million worth of clothes online, and the way that they work is that they try and understand you as a series of individuals and make recommendations to you. They asked us to do a piece of art in the Hoxton Cube to celebrate their 5th anniversary. It was our 5th anniversary. They had 30 people from Susie Menkes, Anna Wintour. There were some celebrities that had supported them, and they were all of their investors as well. And what we were asked to do was to put something up there that demonstrated how potent lists were. And when we talked to their developers, we realized that there are so many brands now selling their stuff through List. Those brands are updating all of those products online, and they're updating them 20,000 times every second. Sorry, 30,000 times every second. So what we did, and excuse me if I get even taller than my 6'4", these are all the brands around the outside. This is a real-time big data visualization map. So the brands push data through to List in a packet. We intercepted that data, pushed it through the projection. So the brand releases information, it goes through to the color, and then into the price, and then into the middle, where it gets updated on the List servers. And this is probably easier to show it in terms of a film. Flowing from the brand at the top. Susie Menkes wouldn't leave it. They were literally going, come and sit down, please, please, come and sit down. But she's really kind of fascinated by the beauty of it. And Chris Morton, who's the CEO, and I were looking at it, and suddenly Chris realised that what he had was a way of understanding trends. So what he's doing now with List is carrying on with the fashion, but he's building a whole new big data division, which will take all of his data, 7 billion items of data every year, aggregate the whole thing and sell it back to his clients, and big data will become a bigger revenue stream than the fashion. So I love those kind of projects. This is the Louis Vuitton store. I'm not going to dwell on this, but it's my favorite technology store because you walk into it and you do not see any technology. There's a lot of technology in here, but it's all hidden away. It's there to be used when it's required, but it's not shouting and screaming at you in the face. And again, why would Louis Vuitton spend huge amounts of money on creating beautiful spaces and then get you looking at a screen? There is a reason why all of you are sitting looking this way. Not looking at the environment, but looking at the screen. Screens can be bad. This is a project we did for Uniqlo in California. So this is all about color correction. So you can wear any product and you can stand in front of this mirror. The product's RFID tag, so it recognizes what you're wearing. All of the colors kind of come up automatically in this screen over here, and then you can change those colors into whatever color you want. And there's a version of this that works with your mobile phone. There's great Wi-Fi in all these Uniqlo stores. If you're on the Wi-Fi because you're checking your emails, when you go near the mirror, your phone starts to vibrate. You pull it out, hey, I'm the Uniqlo Magic Mirror, can I talk to you? And if you say yes, all the colors of that item are now on your mobile, and you can just stand in front of it, changing and looking at all of the colors. And from that, we were asked to do let's ignore that, we were asked to do a project for Lancôme. So this was something that became L'Oréal's Makeup Genius, which is virtual makeup try-on. This was an internal proof of concept for the L'Oréal group before we delivered the virtual try-on for Lancôme, but you choose your color and your makeup changes. And now it's a mobile app with lipstick, with face makeup, and with eye makeup, and we're now doing one for nails, mascara, and trying to sort of draw all of that together. And I think what is quite interesting with this is probably one of those projects that starts to push back against the accusation that a lot of technology is a solution looking for a problem. There is only so much makeup that you can wear, or so much makeup that you can put on in one session. So the idea of being able to explore styles, explore trends, explore the look that Jennifer Lawrence was wearing at the Oscars, to look at what's trending on social media and then actually try that on is potentially quite interesting. And that's the project that we've just launched. And through that, we're doing a lot of work at the McQueen exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum. In this one, it's about taking the actual looks that McQueen was applying to the models, but then allowing you to try those on using that technology. And we've also got to the analog digital idea, a huge 2-meter projection of a face. And I don't know whether you've seen any of these. There's a famous one of Einstein, but if we took a block of polystyrene and we carved Einstein's face out, rather than convex, it's concave, your eye would think that it's convex, and as you walked around the room, basically he follows you. So we've done this with a model. Find me afterwards. I've got a great film on my iPhone of it kind of working. So what you get is this huge face that looks at you wherever you are in the room and then projecting makeup onto it. So again, creativity is all about creativity, but using technology. I'm going to very quickly move on. We do a lot of work in fashion. And we do a lot of work on fashion shows, and fashion shows are interesting for us because it's one of those spaces where the kind of future of retail is being played out in a slightly less risky version, because you can do some quite interesting things on the fashion catwalk, which you may not do in your store. So quite a lot of our clients are testing ideas on the catwalk, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't before bringing them into the store. So this is Topshop. And this is the Unique show. This was a really, really potent show for them. It was the first Facebook fashion show. It reached consumers in 130 different countries, including China. They had 5 million Facebook likes just from this one campaign, and they've constantly tried to do things on the catwalk. So this was something that Ibrahim was showing, but it's a project that our sister company Inition were doing. This was taking the catwalk, and rather than just allowing the rich and shameless, the VIPs, the magazine editors in, actually opening it up and allowing other people to have a look in as well. So in this case, it was using Oculus Rift. People in Windows in the Topshop store in Regent Street could be at the show, and people in the street can view them being at the show. And again, drove huge PR value for Topshop. But the one I'd love to talk about a little bit more, and if there's any sound, that would be brilliant, is this piece of work we did for Dunhill. So what you've got here is 64 real models on a stage, and there's a massive hologram on this side, because there's 500 of you looking at them. There's another 500 people behind looking at them. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen here. And it was great. And anyway, so and basically what you got was a little piece of England dropped in using holography. Now the film of this was shared 2 million times in the first 12 days. So it's a very, very powerful piece of communication for Dunhill. Slightly old school, because the audience were all heavily, very curated and invited, editors, high net worth individuals, celebrities. But it was the first project that we did where the world was really allowed to sort of get stuck in. And then, I think what don't worry about it. We'll just carry on. Oh, well, here we are again. I think what I'll probably do is just finish with a bit of conversation around wearables, if that's okay. Huh? That's great. Don't worry. We'll zoom past this. Anyone feeling sick? Apologies. Yeah. Okay. Wearables. Let's talk about wearables. Okay, I'm just going to finish wearables because it's something that we're really, really interested in just something that's really interesting for us. And we do one wearable project every year, but usually with a creative sort of edge to it. I am not a fan of wearables the way that they are currently existing. I can look at wearables as being inherently selfish. And by the way, that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's all about how many calories you've consumed, how many steps you've walked, how many miles you've walked, and therefore how fitter are you, and things such as that. And that's absolutely fine. There's a need for that, I believe. But I think there's another really interesting opportunity with wearables, and that's to try and make it more of a collaborative idea. So rather than just all of us wearing our watches talking about ourselves, how can we join all of those wearable devices together and start having a conversation about humanity or your city or your society? And we've done a few projects in that way, but to do that, we believe that the wearable technology has to be aesthetically interesting. So personally, I wouldn't go anywhere near any of those products. And apologies if anybody's wearing one or all of them at this session today, because again, they're designed by technologists in some ways. And I think, they need to be designed by people that understand about the beauty of an item. And then how long is your arm? How long is your arm? So I'm much more interested in wearables that's embedded within a fabric or within a piece, a fashion wearable, where you wear it because of the beauty and not because you've got to pick something up and strap something on. Technology is difficult to build, but it's a lot easier than changing consumer behavior. So trying to get a consumer to do something different requires an apple. It's that big. Otherwise, people will always default to what they're used to. So, I was talking about this at a conference about a year ago, and some guy came up to me and said, Jonathan, I absolutely agree. Technology should be embedded in you. And he then showed me his forearm, and there it was. So let's move on from that. So anyway, I just showed him to the door and carried on. I'm a lecturer at Central St Martin's, and this is my colleague on the Future Textiles course. And again, he's got technology which is wearable. It's physically surgically implanted into the back of his skull. This is Neil Harbison. You should follow him. Have a look at him. He's really, really cool. He's a great, great guy. He was born with a genetic issue that he cannot see in colour. He can only see in black and white. And what he's done is that he's installed into the back of his skull this webcam that understands colour. So he says that if he sees a red-headed girl with blue eyes wearing a pink dress, he sees F sharp, D, A sharp as he looks down. And he can hear colour through his skull. He could have it into his ear, but then he couldn't hear what people are saying. He's not deaf. So he hears the note through his skull, and he's now trying to connect himself into the Internet of Things. And he's a very, very interesting thought-leading guy. But this is a project that we did 3 years ago. It's still running. It's an internal project for a French luxury brand that I can't talk about, but let's just say that they're very, very big. They're in France, and I can't think what they rhyme with. Anyway, we have mentioned them before. And what this is a range of clothing, and the clothing changes colour according to the quality of the air that the model's walking through. So it's a pollution monitor, shall we say. So there are 40 items of clothing that we've made. They've been handed to PRs, to friends and people in the company, and they're wearing them not because they want to talk about pollution, but because aesthetically they're very beautiful and they're very wearable. They're just shirts and dresses. They're not sort of going out sort of items, and at some point 2 or 3 of these items are being worn, and every 3 hours the item of clothing transmits back to the brand a real-time reading of the colour and therefore the pollution. So what this brand has done is it's built up a map in Paris of where the air quality is, and last summer in June there was a smog alert, and it got so bad that people were not allowed to travel on consecutive days. They weren't allowed to drive and people were told to stay at home. And somebody stood up in the French Parliament and said, look, the problem that we have is that there are 1,800 boxes that measure air quality in Paris and 600 of them don't work. And we don't really know how bad it is. And this brand, that may or may not be Hermes, stood up and said, we know more about what's happening in your store. We're a fashion brand, we're a fashion label, but we know more about what's happening than you. And again, we really, really like those kind of ideas. This is a piece we launched last year, which is a piece which scans your brainwaves in real time, understands your mood and emotion as you're wearing it, and then completely changes the colours and patterns according to what you're wearing. So this is a cape version that you wear. It's continuous. And what was interesting is that as you talk to somebody wearing this item, it's not changing because the mood isn't changing dramatically, not unless you really prod people. People's moods fluctuate and flow. And what happens, a bit like watching the Northern Lights, as you talk to them, you'll see the colours, but then you'll have a conversation, and when you go back to them, it'll have subtly changed. And we've now been asked to repurpose this for the medical industry because they're interested in ideas around people with strokes or with locked-in syndromes. Can we communicate well-being through fashion? And the piece we're working on at the moment, and this is all I can show you, but we've been asked by the United Nations to do a fashion project in Paris in December this year. There's a very, very big United Nations climate change conference going on, talking about the big ideas. And the United Nations are worried that at this conference there'll be a lot of people saying it exists and a lot of people saying it doesn't exist, and the real messages will get lost. And they're quite interested in seeing whether fashion can cut through that. So what we're doing is we're going to take big data from around the planet, big data around surface temperature, real time, big data around ice melt, big data around sort of ozone hole depletion, and then we'll project that into a fabric so that the fabric's changing colour and providing information according to what's happening in the planet. And what we're also quite interested in doing is heading into the Twitter sphere as well, so that the clothing could basically be saying that we're all going to hell in a handcart, but Twitter is more interested in the size of Kim Kardashian's bottom or something along those lines. So we're quite interested in playing around with some of those areas. I've got one more film to show you, but I'm not sure it's going to work. We'll try it. All the projects you've seen so far have been our projects. Brilliant, thank you. And this one's collaborative. So this is the only one of these that's collaborative. And there's a piece of technology that we've done here. Now, the client builds robotic arms that make cars, but they wanted to do something more creative, and we were very, very happy to talk to them. There's nothing CGI about any of this. You get the idea. I quite enjoy watching that. So my final chart, just 3 ideas that I would leave you with in terms of where I think some of this is going. One is around the consumer. So I get asked by a lot of organisations to vet technology startups that might get integrated into some of these brands' innovation labs. And I was doing one for Unilever about I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, and we saw 30 or 40 startups, and of those 30 or 40 startups, 96% of them had a chart in those very brief pitch documents that said exactly why the brand should use that startup, all the benefits to the brand. Only 2 or 3% had a chart that said why that technology was useful to the consumer. And that to me is at the heart of the problem with technology today. People are not thinking about the consumer, and everything always starts with the consumer. If the consumer doesn't want to download that application, enable it in the settings, point it at a QR code, be taken to another website, get hold of something else, and therefore get a benefit. That brand will not get that benefit. So everything's got to start with the consumer. The second kind of key one is around intelligence. So I'm really, really interested in a growing trend in my world around predictive intelligence, around the idea that I could start up a jam company and I could put it online, and in theory I've got a market of 7 billion people, but I have no idea who those 7 billion people are. But where it's working at the moment is really interesting pre-AI intelligence that'll look at everybody in this room, understand your likes, make inferences about the type of jam you might like, and then I will have a conversation based on your preferences. And we're doing a really interesting project for Estee Lauder at the moment, which is trying to blur or blend the simplicity of Uber with the complexities of big data analysis all through the hit of one button to make recommendations. There's a lot of that that's coming down the line. And just the third one is around interface, which is basically going back to screens. And the Fragrance Lab, we were involved with the Fragrance Lab in its initial incarnation, which was something called the Sweet Shop of about 5 years ago. And it was all about, the senses. It wasn't about just looking at a screen. It was about ideas around touch and around feel and around sense. And it's around experience and engagement. And if you can do that in a retail store, in a retail space, I think you're making a really, really good start. Thank you very much.